Boom, according to that I am live. Welcome to Tokyo Tonight 2. My name is Hiko Simon. Good to have you all here. It's been a really interesting week and last couple of days. Again, hopefully the audio is working good today. Good to see so many people already there in the chat. In fact, would love to say hello to some of you there. In fact, let me just move around my windows a little bit. Boom. Oh, not that. I want to move that. And put this over here, and I see that indeed Tai Nakamura already there. Ohayo gozaimasu to you. In fact, let me. I don't know why it puts it on top chat by default. I want to see all the chat, not the. There is no top chat. So yeah, Tai Nakamura, great to see you. Great to see Andrea Morboy there in the comments. Good to see Marco 19914. Yeah, good to see you. Welcome. We've got Quint Ranked, the J-Vlog, salutations. We've got Yasa, Kyushu Trail, good to see you. Hope you're enjoying Better Call Saul, if you're watching it. We've got, who else in here? We've got the J-Vlog, Tokyo Tonight. Well, it's kind of Tokyo Tonight too, because I restarted. It's really Tokyo Tonight. I think we can just call it that. Olivia D, good to see you, and everybody else. Yeah, hope your week is going well. It's been an eventful time here in Japan, so a bit to update both in terms of what's going on with the old COVID-19, but also some other kind of interesting news this week, so some things to talk about. Also, I've been making, Tai got a heads up of this, Marco from Estonia. Well, cool to have someone from Estonia. Welcome. Good afternoon, I suppose. It'd be past morning for you there, but great to have someone in Estonia watching. Perk, good to see you. Tokyo 503. Remember, if you're in the chat. Oh, awesome. I just saw Tai Nakamura's comment. The one there that just popped up on the screen just now, working on the bass drum. Okay, so I'll come to that in a moment. Remember, if you're watching, I love just seeing. I don't always catch everybody, unfortunately, but please do leave a comment. Say hello. I love just seeing who is there and being able to say hello to everybody. It blows my mind, actually, that there are so many of you in so many different parts of the world that watch. And remember, as always, if you want me to talk about anything, if you've got a question for me, anything you'd like to hear about, just do @Mark Simon. Your name will flash orange, just like Odie Jr. just did. Bada bing, bada boom. Good morning indeed. 4:35 p.m. Okay, so not that far behind in Estonia. I guess it must be nice there at the moment with the days getting a bit longer. So yeah, welcome indeed everybody. Tokyo Digital Crew at the moment. I've actually got a track queued up that I was playing around with last night. I was explaining last night that I've been running lately. I've actually lost quite a bit of weight. I don't know if you can really tell through the video through this, but since like January I was like 86 kilos and now I'm like 79.8, so that's going well. I've just realized I've got to do one quick thing. I'll be right back. Whoops, had to close the door. So yeah, I've lost weight. One thing I've been doing is, you recall I tore my Achilles like running the very first day that I went out, and when we had lockdown in the start of March, and it took 2 months to get better. But the last couple of weeks I've been running it. One thing I've been enjoying doing is using an app called Pace DJ, which just sets a BPM. So basically, it's like I set a beat that I'm basically like, one, it keeps me at a consistent pace, and it's kind of like dancing while running, as far as, that's the way I think of it. And given that I started out with, I set it for like 165 BPM. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but it's the music that I like. I like drum and bass. I like hip hop, which can be like half of that. It can be like 82, 83 BPM. As well as I started out like early on listening to happy hardcore and rave music, which also you hear in gyms a lot, so it's quite good for sort of exercise. So I've been like matching BPMs to that just from my music library for stuff that couldn't be auto detected and adding to that. Last night I was chatting with the members of the Tokyo Digital Crew, including that man there, Tai Nakamura, about some stuff that I was just listening to while we were chatting, and I was listening to Russian hip hop. And I don't know if I don't know Russian hip hop, but I've just heard some Russian hip hop, and the Russian language to me is very, very good for hip hop. It just sounds cool. It's just got a lot of sounds in it. I think Robin Williams once described it as sounding like a tape playing backwards, which is it's kind of true. They have sounds. They can actually move their palate in ways that if you're an English speaker, that you can't make these sounds very well. It makes it very easy for Russians to tell people who have not grown up speaking the language, because they've got these amazing sounds, including some yuz and some nyep. So yeah, in fact, it was. I was trying to show to them how cool it sort of was. I showed some of the music that I was listening to, And when I was trying to explain to them, I was saying that, it'd be really cool to just cut up like some sound from the Russian version of War and Peace, for example. Just to have any Russian over a hip hop beat just sounds really cool. So I kind of did it last night just for a bit of fun. And actually, I've got all the samples that I cut out, and I still need to make my own track. I put some Apple loops with it just to show how cool it is, and it was actually surprisingly cool. So if there's time at the end of the show, I will show you hip hop version of War and Peace, which I'll make a quick track to, because that was pretty awesome. But that said, yeah, Tai Nakamura is also. It's funny. I don't even look at this myself anymore. But below the video, you can see that there is a link to, if you want like swag, like a Tokyo Tonight T-shirt or hat or Tokyo Digital Crew stuff. Essentially, I probably buy it mostly for myself. I actually, Ty was very good last night. He actually asked me if I can make a specific design, like a red Tokyo Digital Crew hoodie. And I sure. And just so that you all know, I don't make any money off that. I've got everything set to be non-profit. It's all at minimum cost. It's the cost that the printer and the provider sets it. But I'm not trying to make a markup off any of that. So one, it's there if you ever feel like getting something to show that you watch this, and if you'd ever like anything, I actually got a brush up last night on how to make those, how to design them. I've got a couple of fixed designs and logos and stuff, and I can stick them on anything in the Spreadshirt shop. And because Ty asked for like a red Tokyo Digital Crew, it was actually really fun. I actually made it. I just stuck it up there. I got myself for boxing like a tank top. With it on as well, so that was kind of fun. So again, the link is down below, and feel free to look at those things actually. And if there's anything you'd like, just tell me. So yeah, lots of interesting things. The weather is getting good in Tokyo, and a big announcement tonight. The main news actually is that in fact, I should say this. It says top stories. What is that top story? I did flip in the link to the article, which is that. Tonight, the government announced, so it was a news flash, and now they've just gone and... What's funny, I mean, obviously the top story is that they're ending the state of emergency tomorrow in Tokyo, in spite of the fact that there was actually a slight bump up in numbers today. Tokyo had 14 new cases, and we have to have under 10 every day for 7 days to qualify for ending the state of emergency. But given how things are doing overall... and the preparations already being made, it sounds like they are going ahead. So Tokyo, well, all of Japan basically, which is at the moment all of Japan other than Hokkaido and Tokyo and the surrounding 3 prefectures, Kanagawa, Chiba and Saitama, they are all still under the state of emergency, but that will end tomorrow. However, what does that mean? I've got some information here about how that is going to work. Andrea Moboya. Butter sales are actually, like, there's been a problem that, again, when you have a mismanaged Stalinist, agricultural ministry, they've been overproducing milk products, so there's actually an oversupply. We've had these years of shortages, but with all the schools not drinking all the milk and whatever, yeah, we have that problem. Just seeing who else is in the comments, by the way, just before we kick off. We've got Will in there saying hello, right back to you. Good to have you here. We've got Sergeant Bilko. Boom, welcome to the chat. Good to have you there. And I think everybody else is in there. So, I see. Now I get it. Andrew Morboy. Can I do branded butter? Unfortunately, it's not in the offered products. Although, yeah, you know what? I should probably contact the New Zealand Dairy Board or something. I could sell at least like 3 packs. I'd buy 2 of them myself. But who knows? Maybe somebody would like some Hiko Simon capitalist butter. Free trade butter. Who knows? Tech Art too. Good to see you there in the chat. Welcome. Just getting started. I need to get in on the agricultural board. Well, that's basically being a diplomat for New Zealand. It's you're basically selling agricultural products, which is all good. It's what I wanted to do for a time, but I'm quite happy with how things have worked out. The heavy whipping cream idea seems legit. Yeah. Well, that's actually something that's possible to do. I'm actually okay for butter supplies right now, but I do appreciate everybody's concern, both for my butter supply and mental health relating to butter supply. It is appreciated. That's a good point, actually. To tell you the truth, the J-Vlog, I don't know where you buy whipping cream in Japan. I don't see it in New Zealand. You have like 10 different types of milk, including, different types of cream in the supermarket. But, I don't know how that really works. But, Andrew Mobile, you can set up in Melbourne. I bet you could. Aloha, Te Waiwai. Are you in Hawaii? You've probably told me this before, but, aloha. it's kind of funny. So you know, in New Zealand we actually say kia ora, but Samoa they say talofa. In Hawaii it's aloha. Yeah, good to see you. I do like a bit of Polynesian to start my day, so good to see all of you. And yeah, as I said, the lead story tonight, the main big news is actually just this evening. The government indicated that they are going to submit a recommendation. Shake a cow. I should make a track called that. That yeah, they're going to go to the panel of scientific experts tomorrow, and they're going to recommend the lifting of the state of emergency for Hokkaido, which is still going through its second wave right now, and for Tokyo and the surrounding prefectures. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that we're all going back totally to normal, but there's going to be a 3-stage, 2 weeks each process, which will be wound back if the numbers go up again. But yeah, it looks like there'll be some semblance of going back to normal. Schools are going to open. People, I'm going to still be working from home for the time being. But yeah, there'll be gradual steps where people will be able to go to restaurants for longer. People will be able to go to parks again and whatnot. So yeah, it should be good. Te Waiwai, you're in Aomori. I see you're in Aomori. But I don't know if there's a Hawaiian connection or you just felt like saying aloha. But yeah, no, that's all good. I should say kia ora actually. I guess. I always say it at the end of the show. I always say ka kite ano at the end of the show, which means see you later in Maori. There's a famous kids show when I was a kid called After School, where the host would always say hello and goodbye in Maori, which is kind of cool. But yes, anyway, so it's ending. I'll explain that in a moment. There's been some other big news this week around. I explain, you know, it's nice to have just any other news to talk about, and there's a pretty good scandal to talk about. Lamb chops. I'm not going to look at lamb chops. He's going to make me hungry, and I am dieting and being successful right now. But yes, so a lot of talk happening right now, and this is still going on even with the emergency about to go off. There's still a lot of people who are very echoes of the nuclear accident situation again. That there are just people who will just never trust information from any government, and for some reason, they will particularly not trust the government of Japan. I don't really understand like the differentiation, but I get it. Being a skeptic is a good thing. It's a question everything. It's a good thing to be. But you know, when you and I can even understand personally disliking Japan's leaders and not trusting their motives. But when you think, it's like thinking that whatever Trump says or thinks translates to what doctors do and to what health bureaus and what the CDC people do, because they all report to him and somehow he must be like controlling all of those people and their work. It's ridiculous, right? I mean, it's actually when you start switching off the brain and just assuming that, you know, that there's a massive conspiracy because of these government leaders. And yes, well, whatever you think of the Japanese leadership, yeah, you have to acknowledge, and it's really coming more and more to light now, the enormous work that has been done by a lot of the testing institutions, by the doctors, obviously, and the frontline medical people. But you know, there's been a big, and of course by the whole society to just sort of react appropriately to this. And it's not out of obedience. Japanese are no more obedient. You know, it's kind of patronizing and horrible hearing people say that, oh, you can tell Japanese people. I mean, it's true that on the one hand, it's interpreted by whoever I say it to, Americans, New Zealanders, and when they ask me how it's going, and I say it's going great, and they say, how could that could be happening? There's no lockdown. And I say, well, yeah, you know, they just trust people to be responsible. And then people say, oh, yeah, Japanese are very obedient. They do what they're told. I don't know, like, to me, I don't see it as obedience. I see it as just like treating people like adults, as opposed to other countries. Like, it's like the default is you should be threatening to put people in jail. And I don't know that, you know, it's not that they're not obedient or obedient. It's that, you know, it's instilling a sense of responsibility in people to do the right thing. And the social shaming thing in Japan is very powerful. I do not have included in here, in my topics for tonight, by the way, the death. It's not clear by what cause of this person who was on Terrace House. I haven't watched Terrace House. I know about it, but it sounds like it is associated with online bullying. And yeah, if there are fans here who know more about this, you could talk about this. I'm not well enough informed. It sounds terrible, whatever it is. But, you know, Japan has a really, really nasty side when it comes to bullying and trolling and so on. You know, that extends into things like this. So, you know, it's kind of funny. It just works in its own way. But look, what the Japanese government has done, they haven't done extensive testing, and this is the main source of criticism, and why people are not happy in Japan with the Japanese government, that tests are not available. In fact, there was actually, I was watching the the weekly children's news with my son tonight. I actually love it. It's a great show. If you're learning Japanese, it's great because they break down. It's actually good for two reasons. It's good for kids because they break down news and they explain it very simply and they explain background. But that also makes it actually really good for adults because quite often news is just giving updates in the moment. They're not giving all the background every time, and it's really hard to understand what's going on. And the kids' news on NHK is one of the best programs on NHK. They explain it honestly in a way that's great for adults. And they were talking about how what other countries are doing to avoid a second wave. And they looked at Thailand and Germany for those two examples. Actually fascinating to see what's happening in Thailand. And Thailand is putting Japan's response technologically to shame. And it's kind of funny that the Western media only seems to cover Western countries and Japan as an oddity. Yet, there are countries like Vietnam and Taiwan and South Korea and Thailand and so on that have been through all of this, and there are lessons to learn from those countries that have handled it arguably very, very well. And you don't see a lot of English media coverage of those. That was interesting. But what was really interesting to me was Germany. Germany is still experiencing like 1,000 cases a day, but they have pretty much reopened the economy there. I mean, people in Japan are questioning whether Japan should reopen with 14 cases today. But of course, the difference is that what they did in Germany was they enabled something like testing, the ability to do PCR tests for like 1 million people a week. And this Japanese show for kids pointed out the way that the Germans can achieve PCR tests of 1 million per week is that they use automated testing with these machines that are basically all Japanese machines. All of these PCR lab testing equipment, which these European countries use to enable these massive testing scales, whereas in Japan it's all done manually by people. And although Japan and Tokyo has only had 300, tests per day in some places, and yet it's also showing up now that the staff of these health bureaus have been hitting the 100-hour overtime. So I think that adds up to like 360 hours a month. Minimum. That is the line set at which they'll presume that someone's worked to death. If there's a claim relating to that afterwards. The Japanese health bureaus, both on testing and on contact tracing, actually doing the sort of private investigation, following up every single case and figuring out every person that those people have been in touch with and going and finding those people and testing them. The approach has been completely manual, completely documented, manual based. And these people, have been taking a lot of criticism. They've been scapegoated by the government. Everyone's saying, why can't you test more? Truth is, apparently these machines that are made by Japanese companies and sold in Europe are not authorized for use in Japan for the same purposes. So it's kind of funny. These solutions which are being used in Europe to enable wide-scale mass testing are by Japanese companies that are not, it's because the approval process is in Japan. And for drugs, as well as for medical equipment, it takes, it's a lot of paperwork, and it takes typically more than a year just to get something authorized, even if it's completely safe. There's no fast tracking, and this makes sense, actually. Japan is conservative, but they want everything to be safe and fully authorized. They don't put out risky or new drugs as easily as some other places. But when you've got a situation like this and the stuff is being already proven overseas and is actually in use, it was a really interesting point that it again shows the Japanese government is pretty inflexible and in a bad light, that they're not making these extra tools available. The other thing that Germany is doing that Japan isn't doing is that they're allowing private institutions, not just public, to do widespread testing. Japan is allowing, they've broadened the edge, but again, they want to make sure that you don't have dodgy tests or, bad sub-quality tests or uncertified testing, labs putting out bad results or mishandling the data. So out of that concern, Japan has this really low number. But where they've made up for it is that they've gone and they've found all the people that come up as sick, and they've been really good at identifying clusters and places where this has happened and manually contact tracing everybody. And look, the testing results are that although Japan is doing much, much less tests than in other countries, when they're testing everybody associated with, who's likely to have it based on the cases that they're finding, we're getting test results now. I think the other day the positive rate was 1.7%. They're testing 99 people and only one person has it. And these are all people who are considered on a really high gating criteria, really likely to have it. So, so far so good. It could be spreading wildly asymptomatically, but it seems like based on the resistance test, which they've already started doing in Tokyo, and they're about to start a 10,000 person trial. They've just done it with 1,000, and it found that the spread was likely to be 0.4% in the population, which is about 80,000 people in Tokyo. The number of recorded cases is something like, I forget the number, it's like 6,000 or something like that. So it means that they haven't been catching a high percentage of the cases, but they have certainly been catching the serious ones. And it looks like it hasn't gone, the idea that Japan has herd immunity and that just through not testing, everybody got it without realizing, doesn't seem to be the case. But yeah, it looks like Japan in its own kind of way, without a mandatory lockdown, but with pretty good cooperation on a voluntary lockdown, has been relatively successful. And yeah, a lot of people are sort of saying, well, people have been beating on Japan for a long time. Japan has done a lot better than countries that have arguably been doing the things that people have been lecturing Japan should be doing, which isn't to say that Japan's necessarily done it right. And it also doesn't mean that it's over. We're definitely headed for a second wave, but yeah, it's interesting. I see Quint Rankin mentioning Taiwan's getting a lot of coverage relatively in the US because of the WHO and their conversation about it. Yeah, and the thing is, if you watch the show, you know that I've been like very frustrated about Taiwan for a long time, and I talk about it a lot and how ridiculous it is that the whole world has to pretend that Taiwan doesn't exist, and WHO is a case in point of this. Also, there are a lot of legitimate complaints about the way that the WHO has handled this. And China as well, but at the same time, the US raising of these concerns, while they are legitimate points, they're the best points to raise, at the same time, it looks a lot like political scapegoating at the same time, like kind of, would the US be so concerned about Taiwan if it didn't present an opportunity to deflect domestic criticism away to China on something else? I wish that that America always paid as much attention as it currently is to the Taiwan issue and getting them into international institutions. Obviously they should be there. But most of the time they don't care because China is very, very important and very integrated with the US economy and politically and so on. It's not the right move. So in a way, we're getting the right result in some ways, but at the same time, it kind of feels like it's for the wrong reasons, and that makes me a little bit cautious about the stuff going on with China and the US at the moment. But yeah, it's certainly interesting times and good news. I mean, like I say, we're going to go into some phase reductions of this. One big discussion, if you're teaching in Japan, that will be of interest is there has been this discussion about using the opportunity of delayed school. Schools are supposed to have started back in April. And right now they're scheduled to start at the earliest in June, and maybe it'll be pushed back if we get a second wave. So yeah, there was a question about, well, why not take this opportunity that I mentioned before about just pushing the year back to September and coming into line with India, Europe, and America, with most of the world, not in line with New Zealand and Australia that follow the calendar year for school years, but with a lot of the year, which will enhance people who want to go and do exchanges in other countries or, go to university in other countries and so on. So it seems like a good idea. Of course, the biggest problem with switching the school year this way or holding the year back is it means you're going to get this sort of glut of 6 months of or 5 months worth of kids who are coming into the school system who all of a sudden, I mean, all the classes, especially in places like Tokyo, there is a limit of like something like 35, but in special cases you can have up to 40 kids in a class. And again, my son's school, all the classes have like 40 kids. But when you add an extra 5 months of kids onto that first year, you're going to have classes of 60 kids, 40% increase. And schools don't have the resources or the classrooms or the space or the teachers to be able to handle the extra 5 months of kids. So there's two approaches being considered. One is sucking it up and cramming them all in at once and trying to figure out how to do that, which will involve needing to hire a lot more teachers. This is part of the reason they figure they can't do it this year. The other approach that they're thinking that makes more sense is to spend 5 years basically adding 1 extra month per year. So rather than adding 40%, they'll just add 8%, I think it is, per year. 1 month, all the kids born in April, then all the kids born in May the following year, and do it like a transition over 5 years. I think it is a good idea to do it. But yeah, it's a big lift, and while simplistically it seems like the right outcome. That is an interesting thing going on, particularly if you're a teacher. It's interesting. Quint Rankid, it's more driven by China's response to the virus. Remember Dr. Lee? Yes, I remember Dr. Lee. And yeah, well, like I say, there are legitimate concerns about all of this, but when Dr. Lee in January was, facing suppression and being detained by police in Wuhan, not by the central government, for leaking information on this, and arguably in late December when he first started messaging about it, remember at that time, the US didn't take any action to really respond to this until late February. They knew what was going on. They could have put they could have put more restrictions, and they could have started preparing for this in January. And through, the first mention of it, like a month after Dr. Lee, was Trump saying it was a Democratic hoax, was the first thing. He was mocking it in early February. It didn't get to the end of February until people in the US started taking it seriously, and then they started blaming China for it. And look, when the WHO came out criticizing countries, including Japan and the US, for putting a travel ban on China, saying it would unnecessarily interfere with economic activity, it did look like they were acting as a mouthpiece for the Chinese government that was trying to, put a good face on everything, and all that is wrong. There's plenty of course, putting doctors in detention for raising the flag on this, but it didn't stop the word getting out in January, and it didn't stop the fact that America, it took 2 months to start reacting to it, and now blaming China retroactively, like, it's all their fault. China was out of the woods by March because they focused on a response, and America didn't take it seriously long enough. So, again, scapegoating China now, it's a good political strategy, and it does look like the world is heading into a new Cold War with China. And there's legitimate points to be made. I'm not defending China in any way through all of this, but it does feel a bit opportunistic and covering up really for the failure, which is playing out, horrifically in America right now, of how it's responded. I found the tweet on that as a Democratic hoax. He said it at a rally. I posted it a couple of times. I couldn't believe it at the time in early Feb. He was saying that liberals were overplaying it to make him look bad in the very beginning, and it took about a month before he started doing it seriously. But anyway, so like I say, to me, the U.S. is as culpable for its own situation as China is for this. Every country's handled it in their own different ways. Certainly China, the China stuff, there's plenty. I'll complain all day about China, but it should be with the right motivations as well. This is interesting. See, this is a flag. Japan has states, well, they have prefectures, which are like states. They have their own police forces, they have their own local rules and whatnot. Yes, this is the flag I learned of Kanagawa. I was looking at the numbers for Kanagawa because Kanagawa, having a high rate of COVID-19 infections, the rest was holding back Tokyo. It was delaying the lifting of the state of emergency. Apparently, it is quite a clever flag. It kind of integrates the kanji for Kanagawa into a flag. However, I must admit, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I thought this makes for one hell of a Rorschach test. I don't know what you all see when you look at the flag of Kanagawa. I salute the flag of Kanagawa. There we go. That is an interesting flag. Don't look at it too much or think too long about it, but it's certainly, you can see river there in the middle. You can see the flower indicator on the top from the original kanji. It makes a lot of sense. But anyway, just thought that was interesting. I noticed that flag and I just couldn't stop looking at it. So yes, that's a thing. One interesting story from this week. Jong. So we had the two members of the A-team in New England in America. We had two former Marines, I think they were. I don't think they were SEALs. I think they were just Marines. But anyway, they were given $300,000 to put Jong into like a speaker case and fly him out on a private airplane to help him escape Japanese justice. So now it looks like the Jong, who is now living in a Nissan paid for company housing still in Lebanon. I don't know if he's moved out of them, but last I heard he was still living. He had escaped to and was living in his house in Lebanon, which is paid for and owned by Nissan. So he's hiding in Nissan, and he's now free from the reach of Japanese law because Lebanon said that they're not going to deport him. There are warrants for him out in France as well as in Germany. for embezzlement and misuse of funds and breach of trust and yada yada yada, which he maintains he's innocent for, but he doesn't want to face charges about them because he thinks that, first of all, the trial was unfair and his bail was somehow unfair. But his bail was like, he was able to pretty much just walk out, of course. So the situation behind Gon, I mean, again, it's a little bit like the thing with America and China that I was talking about just now. Gon had legitimate complaints about the Japanese justice system, the whole holding people until they confess, because, we'll detain you and make it worse even if you're innocent than if you just confess and, make it easy for everyone by saying that you're guilty. It's how the justice system here works. It's horrible. There's a lot of legitimate criticism, but I was really guarded for so many people saying that we should make him the poster child of the flaws in the Japanese justice system. He's not very sympathetic. Obviously, he's a mega rich person, and he used that wealth to basically pay some mercenaries, some American mercenaries, to smuggle him out of the country through Turkey to Lebanon, of course. So the result of that is that now in Turkey, 7 of the people at the airport who managed to wave him through without having him go through a customs check and seem to cooperate, it seems like they were paid bribes to help him fly on to Lebanon. 7 people are now in Turkish prisons. Now 2 people in America are detained and imprisoned and facing extradition to America because Japan has an extradition treaty with America, and what they did in Japan is also, of course, aiding and abetting escape of someone on bail is also a criminally punishable in America. So we've got these 2 accomplices now in America in jail, and Greg Kelly, another director of Nissan, who was detained with Gon for the same reasons as Gon. And of course, also, if Gon was innocent, then Greg Kelly is innocent as well, and maybe he is, but he's still in detention like 1.5 years. How long is this? Nearly like 2 years since they've been into jail now. And Gon has just screwed him. He's left him behind. He's, basically it makes it look like he's ran. So it'll makes Kelly's situation worse. So basically, Gon has just left a complete trail of destruction behind him, and it shows when you're rich. You can throw 7 people in a Turkish jail, 9 people, in jail facing extradition. I mean, these 2 mercenaries are probably going to face in Japan what Gon was trying to escape from because they helped him for $300,000. But money got him out of there, and maybe he's just going to live in Lebanon the rest of his life. But again, and while all the flaws and criticisms of the Japanese, not all of them, but a lot of them, there were a lot of legitimate complaints about both the charges against him, the idea that it was a Nissan coup against him and that they were trumped up, and that no one's ever been charged in Japan with being overpaid before, having deferred compensation, and it wasn't clear that these could ever even hold up in a trial. And these are all the same things that Kelly is going to be charged with as well. All of these were legitimate criticisms, as well as the fact that he was detained for so long and denied access to his wife for so long. But in the end of the day, he escaped, and when you escape, you look guilty. And on top of that, he's just left a trail of destruction for other people behind him. So it's good to be, the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. And again, what's the worst thing about this is that Japan was feeling international pressure about how they were treating Gon, and this probably reflected the more lenient bail conditions that they put him on that he took advantage of to escape, which means the next person, do you think that we're going to be getting lenient bail conditions if there's another CEO that gets arrested? People, the courts, it's basically going to wind back any leniency from the courts, which he got after all the complaining, and he still took advantage of it. So, legitimate points, but still, this is definitely not the poster child to raise when criticizing the Japan justice system. I mean, look, everybody else goes through the Japanese justice system, Japanese people and foreigners, and it's the same. It's just as crappy for everybody. Not everybody can afford to be, to bribe mercenaries and to be smuggled out of the country to corporate housing from a company that you allegedly embezzled from in the Middle East, to escape. So, not the best person to represent that cause, but still a really interesting case. This is an interesting one. I got to remember that it is kind of funny now with everybody working from home. I am on this setup actually at work all the time now. And it's kind of funny. A lot of companies, Japanese companies, trying to figure out how to impose stupid rules the same way that they would have in the office on people when they're working from home. And apparently some Japanese company, one thing with Japan, when you work as a full-time employee, not as a contract employee, not someone on an employment contract that can be renewed every year, but as a formal employee with lifetime employment, I used to joke that you could burn down the building and be reinstated in a labor claim. You cannot be fired. Japan's labor laws are so protective of workers. And I said this to a friend who was a labor lawyer, and they told me, oh no, there was a case where someone actually deliberately burned down the building. Actually was dismissed for a criminal act against the building, and they still got reinstated by the labor court. It still wasn't sufficient for actually terminating their job. So in Japan, people are super protected. So because of that, what Japanese companies do is they've got a system where when you are hired, there's a 6-month trial period, and during that trial period, if you survive that 6 months, then you become a full-time employee and you're safe. But if you during that 6-month trial period, they can pretty much decide at the end of the 6 months to not proceed any further. And so you don't want to do anything like messed up during that period. You want to be on good behavior and working hard. Apparently we have a bunch of new employees who have joined in April, and a lot of these people have never worked anywhere before. They're university grads, and these Japanese companies, apparently one guy got annoyed because there was a new joiner who was like constantly sitting with their face like half in the frame, like I don't know, like this or something like that, which he said was a violation of internet remote working manners, and fired him for it. And you ask me, normally that would be unfireable. That person would be reinstated. But this person was in the trial period, so they could actually be like, well, I don't know. I still think it'd make for an interesting claim. But certainly in Japan, I would say 6 months and 1 day, take your pants off. Make yourself comfortable. No consequences after that. But until then, I would definitely leave trousers on and stay fully in frame. Hands where you can see them if necessary. So yeah, that was an interesting thing. It is a very stupid reason to be terminated, but that's a thing that happened. This I don't want to linger on for too long, but there's a lot of stuff happening. Obviously, Korea's been busy. They've had coronavirus worse than in Japan, and they've done a remarkable job of recovering from it. I don't like to get too sucked into the Korea stuff, but there was you recall I've talked in the past about the labor issue, where a number of workers conscripted wartime labor. People in Japan and all parts of Japan, which during World War II included Korea, Korean workers and Japanese workers and Taiwanese workers and Sakhalin workers were consigned to work in Japanese factories for free during the war. And a lot of people have gone, and Korea has legitimate complaints that a lot of the people who worked in these factories were never compensated by the Japanese government, by the factories that made them do work, or by anyone else. Now, what happened was Japan settled for, at the time, $500 million or some amount like that in 1965. Japan paid. They added up the cost of all claims by all people, and the cost of colonialism, as well as the offsetting the infrastructure that Japan built and paid for in Korea. They did this big adding up to settle all war claims with Korea in 1965. And that was given to Chung Hee Park, the recent president's father, who was a military dictator. He got the payout, and he had the option. Basically, the money was there to settle all claims relating to the war, and this is under international law that made it settled between Korea and Japan. And he chose to keep it secret from the Korean people and to invest all the money he got, instead of in compensating individuals, to spend it on big infrastructure projects, which contributed a lot to Korea becoming wealthy. It was the Japanese money that came in 1965. The problem is this left all the people who worked in Japanese factories not knowing that there was a settlement and never being compensated. So they maintained this grudge against Japan, which has gone up until this day. And they've never been compensated. And, I would say you should go get your money from the Korean government. They've done well with the investment from Japan. The Korean government has basically, until now, on that basis that the claims country to country were settled, they've always blocked court cases trying to sue Japan or Japanese companies to get the money back. However, the current government in Korea is a left-wing government. Left-wing governments in Japan, basically, they politic partly on playing up, injustice towards Japan, because it's always seen as the right wing and the conservatives in Japan that sold Korea out to Japan with like the wartime settlements and so on. So they allowed a court case to go through, which won of wartime laborers, which of course Japan considered a violation of the settlement treaty. So it caused this huge fuss, and this set in chain, this whole motion of retaliation that happened before COVID-19 and the plummeting of relations between Japan and Korea. The settlement for this whole thing was supposed to happen in a bill that was going to set up a fund that would be funded by Japanese and Korean sources to basically ensure that everyone who worked in these factories could be paid. And most of them are elderly and 80 years old or whatever. This was going to be the diplomatic settlement to this whole issue. The problem is that, of course, Korea was busy with the COVID-19 thing, and the bill for the law that was going to set up this resolution expired when Parliament closed without going through. So now they'll have to reintroduce it in the next Parliament session. It's not clear when that's going to be, but the bill has died, so it's not clear if they're going to have the political will when they all come back to actually resubmit this. Another thing that's happening in Korea, which is kind of not related to Japan at all, but what you have in Korea is you also have a lot of these civic groups that basically look after and support and campaign about the comfort women issue, and they gather donations which they use for supporting the comfort women, and they hold them up and they sort of lobby and pressure governments to seek a full apology and not settle for the sort of deals that have been done with Japan about the issue to close it. Again, there's been a corruption issue over there relating to one of those groups where comfort women themselves have called out and said they haven't gotten the money. The money that's been collected for the comfort women has been used by the leaders of those groups for their own election campaigns and has basically been embezzled. And now they're being investigated. And some of the comfort women also pointed out that they don't want to be used for poisoning Japan-Korean relations. They've got their own. They want to be. They've got their own legitimate complaints, which fully deserve to be addressed, obviously, and they deserve to be compensated. They sort of called out that again you have these weird left-wing nationalists over there that were literally taking the funding from the comfort woman to block funding from Japan for the comfort woman to get themselves elected, and taking the money away that they were collecting to pass on. So kind of ridiculous, but this is a problem of individuals behaving in a criminal way within these groups. Nothing to do with the comfort women themselves or even Japan relations in the end of the day, but unfortunately it all adds up to just creating more of a mess that again unfortunately means these issues are just going to remain and be intractable. In a way, it's been nice to not have to stress about this for so long. But at the same time, I must admit, I'm kind of looking forward to going back to stressing about it, just because, obviously what's taking our attention away from all of this news has been, I've just looked at the screen and I see, let's be kind and give Hiko a first warning. I don't know what that's about. I'm almost afraid of that, but, if I'm not in the frame. But anyway, it's kind of been nice not having this kind of Cold War between Korea and Japan for a few months. Although it hasn't been good, but at least people have been busy doing their own thing. Unfortunately, the situation over there isn't good, and I hope it gets fixed. This was interesting. This was the number one Shimbun, which is a kind of newsletter from the Japan Foreign Correspondence Club of Japan. Which nobody reads really except the foreign correspondents themselves. I'm sure I'm wrong about that. Maybe there are old ladies who get subscriptions, but it's not widely circulated. It's really by journalists for journalists in Japan on what's going on in Japan. And they put this parodied logo of the Tokyo Olympics as the cover, COVID-19, sort of making it look like a virus. And it was interesting. So the Olympic Committee said that this cover for the Press Correspondence Club of Japan, it looks, it's very insensitive and hurtful towards the feelings of people who are involved in the Olympics, and is really inappropriate for a media organization to be sort of insulting athletes like this, and they asked for them to take it down. And the FCCJ responded by taking it down, which then proceeded to outrage all the journalists who said, hey, what about free speech? What do I think? Well, I can understand the complaint about it. There again, I actually think it's a clever image, and it's an image which says that the Olympics have been profoundly affected by COVID-19, and that's a fact. And if they're saying it in words or in an image, it's a legitimate statement. How can they be, said as words or as an image? It's hurtful. It's depressing to know that yes, the Olympics have been affected by COVID-19, but how could you deny that that's a fact? So, on the one hand, you could say they didn't really have to back down, but at the same time, they asked nicely, and do you need to burn, again, the foreign press correspondents in Japan already have a problem that the press club system means that they have limited access to press conferences and so on. So something like this, which could be seen as antagonizing the Olympic Committee, could probably themselves be seen as like, okay, if they're annoyed, we should wind it back because we don't want to isolate ourselves more than we are by default already. But in itself, that's a terrible situation. So, which and effectively acknowledging that was the reason that they took this down would be acknowledging feeling pressure to not give obvious, although negative, but obviously truthful coverage about the Olympics. So it's kind of a piss poor outcome, frankly. And really, it was inappropriate for the Olympic Committee to complain about this. I mean, parody is not a protected form of copyright. It's not a protected form of speech in Japan in the same way that it is in countries. Typically, it's an exception to copyright that you can use parody. But in Japan, there isn't that. There's no fair use exception for that in Japan. But to me, this is legitimate. It's inappropriate for the Olympics to call it out. Also, arguably inappropriate for the FCCJ to back down. But I kind of understood why they did it in the end. By the way, Unseen Japan, I've mentioned this recently as well. Great Twitter account and great regular blogs and articles, just adding more detail, explaining Japanese news. I really appreciate it, actually. So you should check it out. To YY, new logo for March here? I don't think so. I think they're definitely going to stick with, well, I don't know. Now that you mention it, now I just remember. I think I have heard something that they might do an adjustment to the logo, but I don't see any point to that. The question right now is whether it's even possible to do the Olympics next year, just given that it's not clear if that the Olympics involve by nature everybody in the world traveling into one place to do the Olympics. No matter how good things are here or in other countries, it's not clear whether all 200 countries in the world are going to be able to get together and do an Olympics even next year. So yeah. Oh, you're talking about my underwear. Well, that's interesting. Wrong kind of stream. You'll have to go. That's on a different site. So you'll find that, if you may find that out. Who knows? This is a scandal that was kind of cool. The prosecutor scandal. So I think I explained this a little bit last week, that we had this thing about this law that kind of blew up in the government's face without anyone really realizing it. So what you have is, in Japan, you have the public prosecutor. I explained this last week about the Lockheed scandal and about the necessary that basically this is someone who has oversight and the power to investigate the government and politicians. So it's seen as being very important that the chief prosecutor in Japan is basically independent from the Japanese government and isn't affected. It doesn't feel like their job is at stake when they're deciding whether to investigate. And again, in America and other countries have seen problems like this recently, where the legislative branch and the Prime Minister Abe are not supposed to exercise influence over choosing who becomes the chief prosecutor, or over making them feel like that if they do a legitimate investigation, then it might be bad for their career. So it was sort of, there was kind of an innocuous bill where, a couple of years ago, they set up an organization within government, isolated from Abe himself, but that has some oversight that would decide on who gets to be the chief prosecutor and whatnot. But there was basically Japan right now, with the need to extend the retirement age, had a bunch of bills where right now the retirement age of bureaucrats in every part of the government is written down in law. So there was like a package of 10 bills to basically take all the different types of bureaucrats and governments who are receiving government salary and give them an extension to their, to basically extend by 2 years their retirement age. And this package of laws included the extension of the retirement age for the chief public prosecutor, the chief prosecutor, who's known to be, the current prosecutor is known to be a personal friend of Abe and is Abe friendly, and people consider that, although there have been scandals like the Moritomo Gakuen school scandal and the Sakura viewing scandal that there was a few months ago, none of them have ever gotten any traction or risk of harming Abe, because everyone knows that the chief prosecutor is a personal friend who's not going to prosecute him. So he was due to retire next year, and everyone was sort of looking forward to this, and including the extension of this person's retirement in with this package of bills was seen as a way to extend a friend, a crony, that was going to keep him safe from being held accountable for these scandals. It seems that one, of course, the left-wing opposition saw this as an opportunity to bash on the government and say that, oh, they're trying to manipulate the personnel decisions in an arm of government that keeps them accountable. But at the same time, it also seems pretty clear that there were also bureaucrats who didn't want the government exercising any, telling them what to do, and particularly people who were like vying, who expected to take over from the current chief prosecutor next year and didn't want that to be pushed back. So there was kind of a coordinated campaign. It was clearly coordinated, and it clearly came from within the investigation bureau, as well as the bureaucracy in general. The media was cooperating with it, and the left wing, the opposition, was cooperating with it. And there was so much outcry over this bill that the government backed down and withdrew the bill earlier this week. So they backed down and they withdrew it, but they also withdrew the other 10 bills, saying that they'll reconsider all of the bills for extending the retirement age. This is the first funny thing, because these bills originally to extend the retirement age were actually bills originally of the Democrat Party when they were in government, that this was part of their own reform of the bureaucracy, that they were going to modify the retirement age. So first of all, you've got the opposition say, hey, we didn't mean for you to take down all the bills, just the bill that applied to your friend. Which is a little bit awkward. But what happened the day after this went down was it came out that the chief prosecutor, a weekly magazine, put out a story saying that he had been at a mahjong game for money, basically like a poker game for cash at someone's house. Of all things, the game, and this guy's seen as an Abe crony, a right-wing crony. It was at the house of a very left-wing newspaper, an Asahi Shimbun journalist, and I think there was also like a Sankei Shimbun journalist there as well. So he was playing while all this drama was going on in Parliament, and while everything was supposed to be locked down, and no one was supposed to be going out at all. So it's kind of sort of a violation of the social distancing request. And it was while his own, HR situation was being really discussed and sort of debated in Parliament. He was playing mahjong for cash at someone's house. And people pointed out, oh, gambling for cash, mahjong for cash, that's illegal. Essentially, it's just playing a poker game. But they said it was inappropriate, it was bad timing. Oh, Marco, 914, thank you for that. Lazy to read news, thank you for that. Very happy to supply them. Thank you for listening. So yeah, the next day, there was a sort of outpouring of criticism that this person was not only ignoring all the debate. Hey, Shubhas, good to see Shubhas is there in the comments, by the way. While all this was going on, that he was actually playing mahjong at someone's house for cash, and he was breaking the gambling laws, he was breaking the shutdown, and wasn't this irresponsible. And pretty much it was being reported the very next day, oh, he's going to resign, and the next day he did resign, and his resignation was accepted. It's since come out. So this is the thing with the gambling laws in Japan. You could ask, how can a game of mahjong at someone's house be illegal when pachinko is basically, as a form of gambling, is not regulated? The pachinko parlors themselves, I think, have operating licenses, but not as gambling institutions. So it sort of is legal, unlimited gambling with billions of dollars. Yet a card game, a poker game at someone's house, could be, Tikyo Sam keeps saying that, a poker game at someone's house could not be. It turns out that the way that the law works is that there are specific amounts. The law is vague on what the amounts are, but for small amounts, gambling at home is not illegal. You can play for $5 bets on a poker game or a mahjong game. This game was using a pretty fixed system called the 10-pin system, which apparently just based on the score that you get playing mahjong, and I'm not an expert on mahjong, but it can add up to bets of between a few thousand yen, like $20-$30, up to 200 yen for a game. Sorry, $200 Nima yen for a game. So it wasn't small amounts of money, but it wasn't really big enough to technically fit. I mean, he's already resigned now. This is the point. He was outed like a month after, and it really showed that there was just this campaign. The people who were out to get this guy were really out to get him, and of course, it ends up reflecting badly on the government as well for appointing him, of course, and. It's embarrassing to Abe, and they're letting him resign but collect his pension. They're not going to prosecute him or anything like that. But it's kind of ridiculous. Look, on the one hand, cronies are bad and, screw Abe and all that. But at the same time, I don't know have you ever heard of a scandal where somebody was like, had to resign from politics for playing a card game for cash? I just finished watching The Last Darts, great documentary on Michael Jordan. There's a guy who bets $10,000 on, everything he looks at. So obviously he couldn't be a prosecutor in Japan. Yes, it's true that prosecutors should be held to a higher standard, but to me, playing a card game, that's like a speeding ticket. So in the end of the day, he's out though. The outrage was loud. The media was in unison, and they were clearly cooperating with the bureaucrats that wanted to get this guy fired. So that's what happened. But yeah, Dan H, good to see you. The casino don't look like they will open. Well, the Sands, I think it's the Sands Group, the Las Vegas Sands Group, has said they're not going to do anything. They're going to pull out because they don't see it's a good opportunity. It looks like there are still people bidding for the Yokohama casino. And the Las Vegas groups are giving up. They look at it as a bit of a rigged game, which casinos always are, but it looks like this will be. I don't know who's in the front. I don't really even care who's in the front running. I think the casino itself isn't going to get stopped, but the Las Vegas bid is pulling out. Some other things. There was a blog that I shared during the week that sort of got around a bit. I got it off Hatina Bookmarks. So I think other people saw it too, where a Japanese blogger sort of listed up all of the possible reasons that Japan has had better results on less mortality with COVID-19, which goes around all the kind of quasi-nationalist, quasi-exoticist, but kind of maybe there's some truth somewhere mixed in all of them reasons that people are talking about. Like they say, Japanese take their shoes off inside. And of course, the moment you say that, people say, well, I take my shoes off inside. Europeans take their shoes off inside, So that's, then you've got people saying that, well, maybe we had a less virulent strain here. What about Japanese, more willing to wear face masks? And this started here in Japan during the pollen season when everyone was wearing face masks. And, there's a list of 48 different reasons. And right now, Rochelle Kopp is actually going through doing a bit of it's only a correlation survey. It can't be scientific as to whether, and it's really impossible to do because although these are cultural sort of stereotypes and trends, it's really hard to put that into hard data and then to compare with other countries. But someone put out this long list. Among it, one of the things that was mentioned was how the Japanese language is a language which doesn't have as much forceful aspirants in the language, which is debatable. Japan definitely has P's and B's and words where you do project. Although it's also true that Japanese, unlike English, I've done this before on the show, you can actually speak Japanese with your teeth clenched and be pretty intelligible, which is really hard to do in English. English, you really speak in the front of your mouth. Japanese, you speak in the back of your mouth. So it means that, Japanese people get really tired when they speak English because they're not used to using all the muscles to move their face all the time. So, for example, if I count from 1 to 10 in English with my teeth clenched, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I can sort of do it. But Japanese, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you can say it almost perfectly, and this is why some parts of the country, and I note for this theory in Iwate Prefecture, they mumble the most in Tohoku. Iwate had no cases, so maybe there's something to it. But TV decided to demonstrate this by saying that, yes, English is a language which just inherently spreads it more by doing a demonstration with somebody having a tissue paper and having them say, this is a pen, and exploding it and saying how in Japanese people don't explode as much. It totally depends on the way that you say it. It was a ridiculous demonstration. But it was something which got around, a lot of people got to laugh at, so that was a thing that happened. That's the thing I was just talking about, gambling experts. He played a card game, the equivalent of a poker game, and he had to resign for it, which, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of reasons not to like him or Abe or to think this is the right outcome, but still, it struck me as ridiculous that that was the reason he got fired. New prosecutor to be appointed. Somebody was complaining, again, this is I think a German person or a European person pointed out, why do Japanese anime characters always look like Caucasians? Let's make them look Asian. I don't know that really looks actually very Asian. They shouldn't have blonde hair for a start if you really want to go all the way to racializing them. But again, it's kind of funny. What I liked about this was the reaction on Nichan to this debate that was happening really among English speakers and so on, talking about how let's make Japanese anime characters look less white. The Japanese sort of universal reaction is anime characters don't look white. Like, how are you even thinking of them as a race? Like, what race are anime characters? They're not supposed to be Caucasian or anything. So there's a lot of people just thoroughly confused by people even thinking that they're supposed to look like any race. Like, they're not intended. They've got the big plate eyes, but that's not intended to be like imitating Europeans. It's just the style that they use for drawing people. And they're kind of like, and some people saying, well, if you want to make them Asian, at least give her black hair. So, basically it's kind of funny. The Japanese reaction to these anime vigilantes saying that we should make, that we want, racial Asian pride in Japanese anime, and they shouldn't be so subservient to white people. Japanese are all like scratching their heads and saying, do these look like white people to you? Which is just kind of funny. It's something I like about Japan. In a way, it's a product of Japan's homogeneity, that they just aren't very... it makes sense in a way. It's kind of counterintuitive, but, when you're in a really multicultural society, you become more aware of what sets you apart. So you become very aware, I think, of being Latino or Asian or white or, Jewish or whatever. When you're in a society where everybody's, 99% of people, it's actually 96.3%, I think, by the latest immigration figures, and allowing for Ainus and all of that as well, that there are small groups in Japan. But when most people are basically the same ethnicity, people just don't think about it as an aspect of identity as much. So it's kind of funny. I think this is where the culture gap happens. It's ironic that the result of there being no diversity is that people don't think about, they just don't think about ethnic identity as much as people from more multicultural countries come from. So I kind of liked how the most puzzled people by this sort of critique of Japanese anime as being so pandering to white people is, show me a white person that looks like an anime character. Everyone seems very, very confused in Japan by it, which is, I don't know, it's kind of funny. This is what's going to happen in Japan. We're already up on time. I want to play my Russian hip-hop at the end of this. I'm going to do that. Astro Boy, love Astro Boy. Dan H, do I see Abe losing the next election? No. I think I mentioned this last week. The risk that Abe has in a way is that I think the LDP only allows people to be the leader of the party for 3 LDP terms, for three-year terms, and he's coming up to the end of his 3rd LDP term, which means I think next year, under party rules, he would have, not under national rules, this is under LDP party rules, he would have to step aside and allow someone else to take over as Prime Minister, which would probably be issued by the former Defense Minister by current polls. However, Abe's been doing so well that there's been a lot of talk about him becoming the 4th, going for a 4th term or changing the party rules. It gets a bit Putin-esque at that point. And there's some speculation that this sort of campaign, this last scandal, which is really focused on Abe, is partly to make that untenable for him to campaign to change the rules to get a 4th term so that other people in the LDP can get a turn. And, it's an internal attack from within the LDP to undermine Abe so that he doesn't get some ideas or grab it, holding on to power longer than he has it. That said, the thing, Dan H, about Japan is that the only party to be suffering worse throughout the scandal in COVID-19 than the LDP is the main opposition party, the Constitutional Democrats. They had a politician resign for being caught using prostitutes during the lockdown. They just seem to figure out a way. They've had, members abusing people in Parliament over bills not related to COVID-19. They just seem to be like the old Brewster's Millions. It's like they're trying to lose on purpose, and they're doing a great job. They're down in like 2% approval, the biggest opposition party. So there's no one who can really take down the LDP. It's just a question of who's going to be in charge within the LDP, and of course that's not subject to a public vote. So no, even with everything going on, unless none of the above actually becomes a party and everyone votes for it, there's nothing that can actually really stop the LDP winning. There was a comment further back, let me see, from Kang and Kodos, True Hiko, but it's most like the tuberculosis shot. Most likely the tuberculosis shot got here. There are other countries that also give the BSG shot, which apparently have had cases, so it seems to be a factor, but apparently there's been research on this since that sort of has dismissed that there's any effectiveness or extra protection from that. It's one of the theories though, but yeah. Andrea Moboy, good night. Have a good night, Andrea Moboy. I'll be wrapping this up soon myself. These are the 3 stages that we're going to have in Tokyo. So we're at stage 0. So that's where everything is sort of no going to. What are these? There's no going to. When they say undo shisetsu, that sounds like a gym, but it's not a gym. That's like a park. So no parks, no museums or no schools. Also, no cram schools in the 2nd row, or movie theaters. 3rd row is amusement parks or pachinko parlors. 4th row is restaurants, including bars, like an izakaya. The next row is eating establishments with contact with people, interaction with people, i.e. basically the whole sex trade and miso shobai and kabakura, places like that, and live house concert halls, and then finally events, which is a little bit vague. So tomorrow we will be going into step 1 in Tokyo, which means that we will be able to have parks open again and museums open again, and schools will be eligible to open, which means my son is probably going back to school, not this week but next week, which is great. But nothing else will reopen. Gyms, by the way, they mentioned on the news, will not actually open until the very end of after all of these stages. The second stage is that you'll be also restaurants that are currently being asked to close at 8 will be able to close at 10, so they'll get 2 extra hours. Stage 2, you can add to that cram schools and movie theaters will be able to open, as well as events of up to 100 people. So just a point on this as well. There's some talk about there being a YouTube party in Yoyogi Park, like in early June. If that's falling in stage 1, well, apart from the fact it's obviously just a stupid thing to be doing, if it gets more than 50 people, I mean, I don't know if you count that as an event. This is really an event like a wrestling event, or where you'd have a big sort of a center. It is outdoors, but the idea of having a party for hours in a park with more than 50 people, which it's likely to be, apart from just breaching all common sense and making us look bad as foreigners and making YouTubers look bad and irresponsible and stupid, because it would be irresponsible and stupid to do, clearly there's no way that it's actually allowed under these rules under step 1. They're not enforced, but clearly we shouldn't be doing it. So that's why I've said I'm not participating in any party that happens in the first week of June. That's just ridiculous. So yeah, second stage is that we get movie theaters back. Third stage is pachinko and amusement parks come back, and your restaurants and bars can stay open until midnight. And it's not until the very final stage that the miso shobai, the establishments where you can interact with people, as they put here delicately, and concert halls and so on, and events of up to 1,000 people can happen in the third stage. These will happen in 2-week allotments, and if the numbers go up again, they'll wind it back. So yeah, that's the exit plan, and it means we've got 6 weeks before things go back to relative normal, all going well, but it's good to see. In news that I can't believe didn't happen in Japan, I did like this. I looked at this and I thought, well, you talk about the sort of thing that you would expect to see. I can't believe this didn't happen in Japan. The South Korean Seoul FC decided that they want to put mannequins, and they ordered mannequins to go all over the stadium, but they got sex dolls. They claimed that they didn't realize they were sex dolls. I don't know how you would not notice that they were sex dolls. They dressed them up. They put them all over the stadium. It looks wonderful. But they got fined for it, for bringing disrepute to Korean football. I feel like this is something that Japanese news readers would watch and feel like, hey, they are like us after all. We can be friends. Yeah, so I don't know. I read news like this and I think, you know what? Sometimes when I think all hope is lost for Korea-Japan relations, I read this and I see, obviously they should be friends. Awesome to see. Hey, Kakita, indeed, to YY. I'm almost done. Naomi Osaka, the highest paid athlete in the world ever. And I can sort of see why. I mean, apart from the fact that she is, of course, a great tennis player, and very successful just for that, just based on that alone. And the fact that she's got this great sort of humble, very likable personality. She's very, very young. That's also appealing. The fact that she manages to, through a fluke of how she was born, she covers both America, where she's culturally assimilated and grown up, and Japan, so she gets sponsors from Japan and America at the same time, and having Haitian heritage, mixed Haitian and Japanese heritage, it also makes her the sort of, poster child for sort of hope and, for development, and a role model for people like in Haiti and countries similar to that to sort of aspire to, that any brand would love to have as their ambassador, to sort of show that we're supporting the sort of person who's has done so great. I couldn't think of really a better sort of a person to be sort of to get a sponsorship or running a campaign for different sort of brands. It's amazing that she's already, how old is she? She's still in her early 20s, I think. So she's this is amazing success, and obviously it's contingent on her continuing to do good at tennis. But and obviously still the amounts, while it's wonderful, they pale in comparison to what even average football players or basketball players or American football players or whatever, or baseball players get as salaries. But it's nice to see the recognition, and great to see her sort of getting it. Tokyo results, that's lockdown results. I think we can skip through these. I went for a run the other day. I actually got quite a good time. I had a Milky Way bar tonight because I did get under 79 kilograms for the first time, so that was good. And that's it. That is it. Theodore Sharp, good to see you. Maddie, good to see you. Tico, Sam, always good to see all of you here. Quentin Rankid, Trump already had mentioned the virus 24 SOTU that Speaker Pelosi ripped up like a State of the Union address. Yeah, but it was the first mention that it came up was again, I remember it, and I remember thinking, geez, and it sounds like he's rewriting history now, but that's just my take, and there's no point even getting into a debate about it. I don't really care, honestly, but yeah. Anyway, that's the show. I was planning to play Russian hip-hop, but it is 11:43 and I've got to get up early in the morning, so I guess I'll do it another night. I might do a Twitch stream or something like that. It might be quite fun to do it that way. I hope you enjoyed the show. Indeed, Maddie, definitely is mostly to do with sponsors, but there's always a big debate around tennis about the prize money. And I think that situation's improving, but it still is different, and that is what it is. But yes, indeed. Mr. Kordychep, I'm sorry that you fell asleep. You get to watch it again. You get all the joy twice. And if you have trouble falling asleep tomorrow night, you can watch it again, and it'll help probably. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Yeah, TQ Sam, there you go. So look, thank you everybody for watching. I am late. This went over. I thought I was all set up. I was all ready to go. I thought I could get to the music tonight, but yeah. No problem, Quint Rankett, at all. And Steve from Berkeley, good to have you in the chat as well. Sorry for the people that I missed who were in there that I didn't call out. Iraq 299, I didn't mention you either, but good to see. No Russian hip-hop. Do you want to hear a bit of Russian hip-hop? I'll tell you, I'm not going to compose anything. I'm just going to play some Russian hip-hop. If that sounds okay, I'm just going to play some Russian hip-hop, and that'll be the end of the show. So let me do that right now. Let me turn on the audio input capture. Okay, let me also plug this in and this in. I'm not going to switch the camera. I'm just going to show you what Russian hip-hop sounds like. Let's just check that we have. Boom. Let's stop. Okay. There we go. So, no keyboard tonight. Let's... War and Peace.
Вот вы узнаете себя. И если вы убедились бы, что вы не любите меня или полюбили бы,
Зачем говорить, когда нельзя словами выразить того, что чувствуешь?
и если вы убедились бы, что вы не любите меня или полюбили бы,
Неужели этот чужой человек сделался теперь все для меня?
Anyway, that's just some random Russian samples played with hip hop, and it was kind of fun. Anyway, I'm going to call it a night. Have a good one, everybody. Remember, like the video if you liked it, and follow me on Twitter if you want to keep up with what's going on in Japan. Have a good night, and boom, peace. Kakitano.
но вы свободны, наша помолвка останется тайной. Но вы свободны, наша помолвка останется тайной. Но вы свободны, наша помолвка останется тайной.
С того дня, как вы приехали в отраду,
Good night.